Good afternoon, friends. So we will continue with the lectures on neutron diffraction, especially magnetic neutron diffraction. Professor Yusuf has given you the introductory lectures. Now the module will continue with Dr. Anil Jain, who is an expert in this field and have been doing this research using neutron and specifically in the field of magnetic neutron diffraction. So you'll hear from the horse's mouth, and I will leave it to Dr. Jain to explain to you how things are done in magnetic neutron diffraction. But before I allow him to start, I'll just take 1 minute to tell you that you need to download another assignment for the basics of neutron scattering from www.anuvidya.in login, and please submit it to neutroncourse@gmail.com. Today is 11th. I will expect you to do it within next 1 week's time. Thank you. Over to Dr. Anil Jain.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, in this lecture, we will try to understand that how you determine magnetic structures by neutron diffraction. So, before I come to the point that how neutrons are used to determine the magnetic structure, I will first like to introduce that what I mean by the Rietveld refinement. Many of you are in the research and you daily use this terminology that we do this Rietveld refinement. So most of the result which we see in the diffraction, they are in the reciprocal space. So this space which we see at the outcome of this diffraction experiment in the Q space, which is Fourier variable of your real space R. So to understand anything in the diffraction, it is always nice to think about the reciprocal space. So here I show this direct space and the reciprocal space. You know that the reciprocal lattice vectors in the reciprocal space are given by this relation 2 pi B cross C, and B is the volume in the direct cell. Similarly, one can write this B star means this reciprocal lattice vector along the B star direction and the C star direction. Now this A star, B star and C star. So if you have, let us say, orthogonal system where your angle alpha, beta and gamma are 90 degrees, and let's assume that we are in the cubic system. So then our this A star, as you have seen, becomes like shown here 2 pi by V B cross C. So here it is 2 pi V B cross C. So if we are for a cubic system, here V is nothing but the volume of the unit cell in the direct space. So B is nothing but A dot B cross C. So if I am in the orthorhombic system, this becomes A, B and C. So my A star is nothing but A star is nothing but 2 pi by A is my A star. So try to keep this always in the mind. If your lattice constant in the real state is larger, then in the reciprocal space it will be smaller. So and similarly you can write the expression for B star, which becomes 2 pi by B, and C star, which becomes 2 pi by C. Now suppose you have an orthorhombic system and you know this reciprocal lattice vector. Now you can draw the reciprocal lattice of your system. So it will be so these are the reciprocal lattice point I am trying to draw in the AB plane. Sorry. So this is A star, B star. Similarly, it will go in the third direction, C star. So here, like this first point, this represents this plane of sort of 1 0 0. This represents the plane of 0 1 0. This represents the plane of 1 1 0. And similarly, now you can construct this reciprocal lattice of your sample depending on its crystal structure. Now, question comes that if you have a material and your idea is to get the information about this crystal structure of a material. So first problem is you want to determine the crystal structure of a material. So ideal way, if you want to determine the crystal structure of a material is you should have a single crystal, and for the single crystal you can draw the reciprocal space which looks like this. So here I am drawing the reciprocal space in AB plane, and you know you can construct this Bragg's law in the reciprocal space. So here I have a incident beam whose magnitude of this incident wave vector is given by Ki, and now I draw a sphere and this Ki terminates at one of the reciprocal lattice point of your sample, and now I draw a sphere of this radius of Ki, and if this sphere touches any of the reciprocal lattice point of this system, then you will get this scattered neutron or scattered beam, whether it is neutron or X-ray, depending on the experiment, emitted from that direction. So this is Ki, this is Kf, and when we are doing diffraction experiment, what we assume is that while diffraction experiment is that magnitude of Ki and magnitude of Kf is same, and you get the diffracted beam when Q, which is momentum transfer, Kf minus Ki becomes one of the reciprocal lattice vector of your sample. So this is the Q becomes reciprocal lattice vector of your sample, then you get the diffracted beam. Now suppose you have some unknown material and you have a single crystal of that material, and you are interested in determining its crystal structure. So as I told you, this reciprocal lattice is 3-dimensional. So when you do the experiment, let's say with the reactor based source, so you have some incident monochromatic beam of the neutron. This beam is reflected by the sample and you access this reciprocal lattice point. So when you are in the horizontal scattering plane, if you have Ki and Kf, then your Q also remains in the same horizontal scattering plane. So now by rotating your crystal, which is omega, and moving your detector, which is 2 theta, you can try to access the reflections which lie in this plane. But suppose you want to determine the crystal structure completely, then you have to access all the reciprocal lattice point of this sample. So it means you have to rotate, tilt your sample to bring all this reciprocal lattice point, which may be above than this horizontal scattering plane, to bring them in the horizontal scattering plane so that you can carry out like omega scan on those and try to get the integrated intensity of each Bragg spot. So what one has to do is one has to access all this reciprocal lattice point as maximum as one can do and try to get the intensity information of every reciprocal lattice point in the 3-dimension. So to do this job, what one need is a 4-circle goniometer. In this 4-circle goniometer, there are 4 axes. So you have one axis which try to rotate your sample, which is called omega or theta. You have another axis which changes the angle between incident beam and reflected beam, which is called 2 theta. So you have theta, 2 theta, omega, which can rotate the sample, chi and phi. So by using these 4 circles, you can bring any of this reflection in your horizontal scattering plane, and then you can measure the intensity of every of this scattering point. And once you have integrated intensity of all these points, then you can solve the crystal structure. So here, this is the sphere. This is called Dewald sphere, and this is the momentum transfer, which is 2 mod of k sine theta. So which becomes 4 pi by lambda sine theta, which you might have already understood by this time. Now, in general, ideally, if you have to determine crystal structure of an unknown material, what you need is a single crystal data. But you know, synthesis of single crystal is a tedious task, and especially if you want to carry out neutron scattering experiment to determine the crystal structure, then it becomes more tedious because neutron flux generally is low, so you need bigger size crystal. So the alternate to this, of course, it is not for the determination of crystal structure, but what people do, and most of you do, is prepare this powder sample. And then most of you routinely carried out this powder diffraction experiment. And what you measure in those experiments is your intensity of the beam with respect to your scattering angle 2 theta, which is the angle between your incident beam and your detector. So you plot this intensity as a function of 2 theta, and this 2 theta you can convert, if you want to remove this dependency on the wavelength, into this parameter which is called Q, which is 4 pi by lambda sine theta. So you get this pattern which is intensity as a function of momentum transfer Q. So this Q you can get from 2 theta, because in most of your conventional X-ray or neutron diffraction experiment, your wavelength is fixed. So by utilizing Q equal to 4 pi by lambda sine theta, you can convert this data into the intensity versus Q. Now, what is the disadvantage of this problem? Now, this technique of powder diffraction, which most of you used, was developed by Debye and Scherer in 1916. After development of this technique, nearly for 50 years, it was just used for qualitative phase analysis and to get the information about textures, means preferred orientation. The major problem to get the information from the powder diffraction is when you have this single crystal data, you have 3-dimension reciprocal space. While doing this powder diffraction data, you have projected this 3-dimension reciprocal space in 1 dimension. So you have lost the information about this different individual Bragg spots. So you cannot precisely determine the intensity of each individual reflection to determine the crystal structure. Now, after something like 52 years or so, Rietveld devised a method, and what he said is now, because in the powder diffraction now, as I told you, you project this 3-dimension reciprocal space in 1 dimension. So like if you have single crystal data, all these peaks, like if you have a cubic structure 1 0 0 0 1 0 0 0 1, they are separated in the reciprocal lattice. But the moment you do the experiment with the powder diffractometer, all these 3 set of planes gives the peak at same location. So there is a problem of peak overlap. And that's what it becomes difficult to determine, to get some information from the powder diffraction, because you cannot get the intensity of each individual peak. So in 1969 or so, Rietveld came with the idea that instead of getting the integrated intensity of each reflection, let's calculate the entire powder pattern. So you calculate the intensity of entire powder pattern, let's say intensity as a function of Q or 2 theta, and you calculate this intensity and try to match this entire calculated pattern by the observed pattern. And now you try to minimize this weighted difference between this calculated and observed pattern. So this is the refinement method. And by using this method, you can get significant amount of information about your sample. But remember, this is a refinement method. So it is not a method to determine the crystal structure. So you should have good initial guess of the structural parameters of your sample. By using those parameters, you can refine the crystal structure of your sample. Now, if you take a typical diffraction pattern, which I want to draw it now. So what you have here is the intensity as a function of 2 theta, or as a function of q, which is nothing but 4 pi by lambda sine theta. So you get something like this kind of pattern. Now, idea is to get the information from this powder diffraction pattern. And the idea of Rietveld refinement is that you try to calculate the full pattern depending on the model what you have, and then try to minimize the difference between observed and calculated pattern. Now, once you have this neutron or X-ray diffraction pattern, there are a couple of information which we get from this powder pattern. First is this position of these peaks. So this position of the peak, you can find out this position of the peak. So like you can fit these peaks. So this peak, you know, Bragg's law, which is 2d sine theta equal to lambda. So now in your experiment, this lambda is fixed and you are getting the peak at different value of theta. So with this peak value, you can find it out what kind of d values allowed for your sample. Now, before going to this, I just wanted to mention one more thing, that what you have in a typical powder diffraction experiment is that you have incident beam of the neutron or X-ray. This is, let's say, characterized by its wave vector ki, and it falls on your sample. So once you have powder sample, you have crystallites which are randomly oriented. So you have different crystallites which are randomly oriented. So all these crystallites for which this d value can satisfy this Bragg law, which is 2d sine theta equal to lambda. Now your lambda is fixed. So depending on the d value which is present in your material, what you will find is you will find this Debye-Scherrer forms. Like this. Now, depending on the facility, what you have, either you can put a 2-dimension detector or 1-dimension detector, which will generally just take this slice of this cone, and what you will get now in the pattern is the intensity as a function of 2 theta, like this, where 2 theta is the angle between this. So now this position of these peaks, if you know the position of the peak in the diffraction pattern, then you can easily tell what kind of d values are present in your sample. So this peak position, this gives the information about the lattice parameter, ABC, and space zone. Next is the intensity of these peaks. So intensity of these peaks gives the information about the crystal structure. It gives the information about the content of your unit cell, that where the atoms are located in your unit cell. Debye-Waller factor, it gives the information. It gives the information about the occupancy of particular site. So in your crystal structure, you might have a couple of sites which may not be fully occupied, and the intensity of your diffraction pattern gives the information about this. Intensity also gives information about the texture in the sample. So texture means you have preferred orientation. So some of these planes are aligned more, you get there more intensity. From the intensity, you can get the information about the quantitative phase, that what is the quantity of each phase present in your material. The another important parameter in your diffraction pattern is the profile, means what is the profile of your peak, and this peak profile provides you the information about microstrain. It provides the information about the volume or size of the coherent scattering domain. So it provides the information about the domain size. And moreover, between the peaks or below the peak, you have background. This background can provide the information about the diffuse scattering. It can provide the information about this local structure. So these are the information which lies in your powder diffraction pattern. So in Rietveld method, what we do is we try to calculate the pattern at each point where you have recorded your experiment. So like suppose you have an intensity versus 2 theta, and you have recorded your X-ray or neutron diffraction pattern at the step of, let's assume, 0.02 degree or 0.05 degree. So we try to calculate this YC at each step of the full pattern. So here YB is the background at each point, and YH is the contribution from the back reflection which is coming at that point. Now you calculate this pattern, you calculate the full pattern, not the individual intensity. And then try to do the least square minimization of the weighted difference between the observed and the calculated intensity. And this least square you can do by using a couple of parameters. These parameters are of your structural model, and then you can refine these parameters, and then by this method you can refine the crystal structure and can get an idea that what is the crystal structure of your sample. So this is the, as I told you previously, it is the refinement method. So this is used to refine the crystal structure, not to determine the crystal structure. And idea is one has to do this least square minimization of the weighted difference between the observed and calculated intensity. Observed intensities at point of like 2 theta of 0.05 you have from the experiment, and you try to calculate the intensity depending on your initial model what you have, and then you can refine the parameter of this initial model, like the position of your atoms. You can refine the ABC parameter, you can refine this Debye-Waller factor, you can refine this profile. So by doing this, you can get this information about this structural part of your sample. Okay, so background. So generally, let's say you are doing this neutron diffraction experiment. The question someone is this: why does this background comes? So the background source of this background is your incoherent scattering. So if I can use the pen. So when you have this neutron diffraction pattern, what you have is E sigma over d omega. And this average scattering length give you the information about this coherent part. So all this peak which you get, let's say in the case of neutron scattering, are coming from the average scattering length. Now you have the deviation from the average. This has dependence on delta Q minus G. So this is called coherent, and this part is called incoherent. So this incoherent part has no dependence on Q, means it is present everywhere. Now, what is the source of this? So you know this, when you have neutron nucleus scattering, you have spin states, you have isotopes, and this B depends on this relative orientation of this neutron spin and the isotope. So there will be B which will be different, and the average of this B will give you coherent part. The deviation from this average will give you incoherent part, or like you have some defects, or you have some inhomogeneities. All these things are going to give the background. Is this clear? In the interact. So any this coherent part means average scattering length give you the information about this coherent scattering, means your Bragg peaks, and the deviation from the average gives you incoherent part. Now, as I was telling you, that in a typical experiment, what you have is this is the incident beam, and in the powder sample, you have the crystallites which are randomly oriented. As you have the monochromatic beam of, let's say, neutron or X-ray, so your crystallites, they are randomly oriented. And now if you have a D value which is present in your sample, then as per this 2D sin theta equal to lambda, so the D is now the property of your sample, lambda is fixed, so you should get this cone at couple of value of theta, which will be determined by the properties of your sample. This is how you get the information about the structure of your sample. Now, so this was the part I wanted to tell you, that what is the idea of the Rietveld refinement and what kind of information we can get about this Rietveld refinement. So far the part which I have covered only relates to the Rietveld refinement of the structural part. And this is the refinement. It is not the determination of the crystal structure. What you should have is, you should have a very good initial guess of your crystal system. Then you can try to refine the position, occupancy, and try to match your calculated and observed diffraction pattern. This is how you can refine your structure. And to determine the magnetic structure is determination. To determine the magnetic structure, first of all, you have to fix, you should know precisely your crystal structure, then only you can proceed towards determining the magnetic structure. I think this part you know. Now I'm trying to switch towards neutron, because I want to reach towards this magnetic neutron scattering or Rietveld refinement of your neutron diffraction pattern, to get the idea about the magnetic structure of your sample. So you know that neutron interacts with your material by the two mechanisms. Neutron nucleus interaction. The elastic part of this interaction gives you the information about this lattice structure. Means you get the information about density correlation. And inelastic part of this neutron nucleus interaction gives the information about the lattice dynamics. But the neutron has another channel by which it can interact with your material, that is magnetic dipole-dipole interaction. Because neutron has magnetic moment and it can easily interact with the magnetic moment of unpaired electron in your system. Elastic part of this interaction channel gives the information about static magnetic structure. So what we want to probe by doing neutron diffraction experiment is we want to determine this static magnetic structure of the material which we are investigating. But before determining magnetic structure, one should be clear that what is its crystal structure. Then only you can proceed towards a determination of the magnetic structure. I believe this part might be covered a bit. So the source of this elastic magnetic neutron scattering is you have the magnetic field which is generated by the unpaired electron in your sample, and you have the neutron which is a magnetic moment which is given by minus gamma, mu and sigma, where sigma is the Pauli matrix, gamma is gyromagnetic ratio, and mu n is nuclear magneton. And this magnetic moment of the neutron can interact the magnetic field which is created by the unpaired electron in your system. So in the definition of this Fermi's golden rule, you can determine this cross section, and this interaction is given by mu dot b. I'm not going to go into the detail of this part because I assume this part is already covered. So the important part of this is this cross section is square of magnetic scattering length. And one point I want to make it clear here is that this magnetic scattering length is of the same order of magnitude as your nuclear scattering length. And this allows you to see the magnetic peaks. Because if they are small, you cannot see these magnetic peaks. This is what happens in the case of X-rays. So if you try to calculate the magnetic scattering cross section for the X-rays in the non-resonant condition, then what you find is that your magnetic scattering cross section is something like 6 to 7 order of magnitude smaller than your Thomson scattering. That is why it is difficult to get the information about the magnetic structure from the X-ray in the non-resonant X-ray scattering mode. Another important point of this cross section is because what you have now here is two cross product in this interaction. So curl of this A, so this quantity here is your vector potential. Now due to the presence of this two cross product, your cross section in the case of magnetic neutron scattering is sensitive to the Q. So what you see in the magnetic neutron scattering is the component of the moment in a plane which is normal to the Q. And this is given by this vector. So please keep this always in the mind that when you are doing the magnetic neutron scattering, you are only sensitive to the component of the moment which are transferred to the Q. And this is the structure factor or d sigma over d omega in the case of magnetic neutron scattering. So here, this is the square of magnetic scattering length, and what you have is the polarization factor, which take care that you see the component of the moment which are normal to Q. Now, when you do this elastic magnetic neutron scattering, you get the peak where your momentum transfer, which is q still, becomes one of the magnetic reciprocal lattice vector. Please note that this is not the nuclear reciprocal lattice vector. This is the magnetic reciprocal lattice vector. If you have a simple kind of magnetic ordering, like say ferromagnet, ferrimagnet, then in general, the size of your magnetic unit cell remains same as your nuclear cell. So it means your magnetic reciprocal lattice vector remains same as your nuclear lattice vector if you have ferromagnetic or ferrimagnetic kind of order. But if you have a antiferromagnetic ordering, let's put it so. Let's say you have a one dimension system. Let's assume for the simplicity, and suppose this is your A. So now let me talk about Gn, which is reciprocal lattice vector for your nuclear system. This is nothing but 2 pi by A. Now suppose each of these atoms carry magnetic moment. Then what you can have is, first let's assume they order in a ferromagnetic structure like this. So now your magnetic unit cell is also, your Gm is, now suppose you do the experiment for this material. This is hypothetical experiment you do, and so let me erase this. So here Gn is 2 pi over A, Gm is 2 pi over A. Now you do the experiment, the temperature above and below the magnetic ordering temperature of your sample. Suppose you do the experiment above the magnetic ordering temperature of your sample, and suppose this is the intensity, and here I plot as a function of q. So you get this intensity when q is one of the reciprocal lattice vectors. So you get the peak, let's say 2 pi by A. This is pi by so 1, 2 means 4 pi by A. So like this, you get the peak. So this is the experiment if you do above this ordering, magnetic ordering temperature. Now suppose you do the experiment below this magnetic ordering temperature for the same sample, then what you find is that now your magnetic reciprocal lattice vector is same as the nuclear reciprocal lattice vector. So what you will find is that enhancement in the intensity at the same location where you have this nuclear peak. Remember, this enhancement in the intensity of the peak in the magnetically ordered system happens only at low value of q. Because so if I see this magnetic contribution, this goes down as I increase the q, and this is due to this factor which is called form factor. Because in the case of neutron scattering, your neutron interacts with your sample with a magnetic moment which is extended in the space, and due to which you have the form factor when you do this magnetic neutron scattering. And due to this form factor, the intensity in the case of magnetic neutron diffraction is reduced as you increase the value of Q. As this interaction, due to this interaction of the magnetic moment of your sample with the magnetization density in the sample and this magnetic moment of this neutron, by doing this neutron scattering experiment, you can get the idea about this spin density distribution of your sample. So this is the one case where your material is ferromagnetically ordered. So if you have magnetic ordering like a ferromagnet or a or a ferrimagnet, then your magnetic reciprocal lattice vector are the same as nuclear reciprocal lattice vector. So if you do the experiment below the magnetic ordering temperature, then what you get is an enhancement in the intensity of your nuclear reflection, but this enhancement occurs only for the reflections which are at the value of low Q, because at higher Q, due to the form factor, your intensity is reduced. Now let me take the another case where your material is ordered in an antiferromagnetic structure. So let me erase this part, and now again suppose you have this one dimension system, and now suppose this distance between the nearby atom is A. So again your nuclear reciprocal lattice vectors are the same. However, let us say this material ordered, this hypothetical material is ordered in an antiferromagnetic structure. Now this magnetic ordering is antiferromagnetic. You can clearly see that now this length of the magnetic unit cell, this is the length of magnetic unit cell now. So length of the magnetic unit cell is 2a, and this implies that your magnetic reciprocal lattice vectors are pi a, 3 pi a, something like this. Now if you do the experiment with this material below and above the ordering temperature, then let us see what happens. So this is T above Tn, and here I plot intensity as a function of 2 theta or as a function of Q. So here I get this where my Q is, this is 2 pi by A, 4 pi by A, 6 pi by A. This is T above Tn. Now suppose if I do the experiment T, then I have intensity versus Q. These are the nuclear reflection. But here now you know that your magnetic reciprocal lattice vectors are different than the nuclear reciprocal lattice vector. So you will get this additional peak, let's say pi by A, 3 pi by A. So as a thumb rule, when you have antiferromagnetic kind of ordering, you get the additional reflection in your neutron diffraction pattern at low temperature. So you get this additional reflection, and then the idea is to get the information about this magnetic structure of your sample. Now, how we do this kind of experiment? So for doing neutron scattering experiment, we have the neutron source, which you know Dhruva reactor, and this is the Maxwellian, the moderator. So this neutron, which are emitted from the reactor, has some Maxwellian distribution. So you have the all sorts of neutrons of all energies. For like thermal moderator, this wavelength range is something like 1 to 3 angstrom. Most of the neutrons are in this range. But for doing diffraction experiment, for the continuous source like reactor, what you need is a monochromatic beam. Now, how to get this monochromatic beam? So to get this monochromatic beam, what you have is you try to take this slice of this Maxwellian. This is Maxwellian. I have to take only this slice of this Maxwellian. And for this, what I do is I put a crystal which is called monochromator. So monochromator is a single crystal. So here what I show you is this is the wall of the reactor. So the Dhruva reactor has a cylindrical wall. So outside this biological shield, here you see a beam hole. So this beam hole is providing neutrons. So we have the monochromator just, there is a small cavity here. So in this powder diffractometer 1, we have a monochromator which is just inside this biological shield. And what this monochromator does is, out of this Maxwellian which you are having, this selects a particular wavelength of the neutron, and this monochromatic neutrons which we have selected only a slice of this Maxwellian, this falls on our sample. So here is the place from where we have the monochromatic neutrons. As these neutrons are coming, and this is the CCR. So this is the device which is used to attain this low temperature of your system. So your monochromatic neutrons comes and they falls on this sample. So what kind of sample holder or what sample we have? So for doing neutron powder diffraction experiment, what we have is we have vanadium cans, and this vanadium cans we have of different size, something like 6 millimeter, 8 millimeter, and the typical length of these cans are something like 4 to 5 centimeter. So these cans are, I think, I don't know whether you can see it. So these are this kind of cylinder. So in this cylinder, what you do is you fill your powder material. So you fill your powder material in this can, and you try to fill as much as you can fill this can, and this can then goes gone in this CCR, which is closed cycle refrigerator. So it can vary the temperature of your sample from 4K to 300K. We have another sample environment where we can go to higher temperature, something like 1400 degrees centigrade. Now this monochromatic neutrons, which are coming after this, neutrons are reflected from this monochromator, they fall on the sample, and after this, they interact with the sample. As you know, Debye-Scherrer cones are emitted. So to collect this intensity of this Debye-Scherrer cone, what we have used here is position sensitive detectors. So in this diffractometer, what we have is 3 one-dimension position sensitive detectors. So each detector is of the length something like 1 meter, and it covers typically, depending on how far you are from the sample, something like 27-28 degrees. So depending on this, how much detector you can put it, you cover this angular coverage of this detector. So get the data in terms of intensity versus this channel value. So this length of these detectors are divided in the channel, something like 1024, and then you calibrate this instrument and try to convert this channel in the 2 theta value, and then you put your sample and get the data in the intensity versus Q or intensity versus 2 theta value. So this is the CCR where we put the sample, and this is the radiation shield for the CCR. here you can see this inside of this detector. So only here you can see this one detector and there is shielding so that you do not increase the background of your diffraction pattern. So here we have three detectors. They cover something like 70 degrees in the horizontal scattering plane, and you record this intensity. And this CCR allows you to vary the temperature of your system. This is another diffractometer where we have the wavelength is 1.24. Here we have more angular coverage, something like 160 degrees or so. Here also we have the beam which is coming from the reactor, and this beam is monochromatized by the germanium 331 monochromator. I think as a quiz, you can note it down that you know Bragg's law, it is 2d sine theta equal to n lambda. Now, if you have n equal to 1, you should have a second order reflection from n equal to 2. We use this crystal silicon and germanium because they have some particular advantage. So if you know, remember correctly, this no voice. So here, so here basically you have the neutrons and there are 5 detectors. So germanium and silicon, you know, has a diamond structure. And the particular beauty of this diamond structure, you know, it has FCC structure, and in the diamond lattice, you have 2 interpenetrating FCC lattice. So due to this 2 interpenetrating FCC lattice, which are shifted by 1 by 4, 1 by 4, 1 by 4, we get a very important extinction condition here. So you know, for the FCC lattice, you have a condition that all HKL should be either even or either odd. But in the case of due to this diamond structure for the silicon and germanium, we get this additional condition that when H, K and L are even, then the sum of H plus K plus L should be 4n. Then only you will get this diffracted beam. Otherwise, your structure factor becomes 0. And this gives a important advantage. Like if I use this 331 of germanium or 551, then the second order reflection of 331 becomes 662. And now the extinction condition do not allow neutron to be reflected from this reflection. So this structure factor for the 662 reflection is 0 because H plus K plus L is here 6 plus 6 plus 2. 14. So this is not the multiplication of 4. That is why this structure factor becomes 0. Now just basically I want to introduce now couple of magnetic structure which we see, and then we see how to determine this magnetic structure. So you have different kind of magnetic ordering. You have first sample in the paramagnetic phase. You can have ferromagnetically ordering system. Here all the moments are aligned in some particular direction. You can have antiferromagnet where the net moment in the unit cell is 0. You can have ferrimagnet, and you can have other interesting stuff like spin liquids where the spin do not order. We can have canted kind of antiferromagnet. There are interesting stuff of this magnetic ordering, which I think we will take in the next lecture. So if you have seen this neutron scattering, so as I told you, so your average scattering length give you the information about this coherent scattering, and deviation from the average, which is like distribution of your spin states, isotope. So any deviation on the scattering length from average gives you the background, which is incoherent and present everywhere. You can have structural defects in the material. This can also contribute to the background.